These circular crunchy discs of corn have completely changed how I approach weeknight dinners over the past 3 years in 3 key ways. Let me explain.
1, I can add a lot of toppings without them falling apart, like those hard shells tacos that break like eggshells. 2, tostadas are one of the best ways to use up leftovers. And 3, they can easily be turned into a healthy dinner depending on your goals.
Everyone knows about Taco Tuesday, but for me, Tostada Tuesday has become a much more common occurrence.
So, in this video, I have 3 weeknight tostada recipes to help you get started on your journey. But first, you may be wondering, what's the best type of tostada to use? In my opinion, the 2 key characteristics that make a great tostada are 1, a thick, crunchy texture, and 2, a deep corn flavor. Now, it's super easy to make your own with stale tortillas and just fry them up, as I've shown in this video a couple of months ago, or you can go ahead and buy them. There's a wide variety of options with different textures, so I would recommend trying out a bunch, but this brand, El Milagro, is definitely my personal favorite. Ultimately, the best tostada is the one in front of you, but thick and corny is what I would look for so it holds up to the toppings that I can put on them.
So let's hop into tostada number 1, which is my ultimate comfort tostada, and all you need to get started is a can of beans.
Well, it may seem kind of lame, do not sleep on the bean and cheese tostada. It's a simple comfort food that only requires a can of pinto or black beans to get started. I've made countless variations on these, and they all follow the exact same blueprint, which is 1, saute spices and aromatics, 2, add beans, mash them and reduce, and 3, adjust salt and lime to taste. To start, set a pan over medium-high heat and add a 5-gram drizzle of oil. Next, toss in 2 cloves of sliced garlic and a sprinkle of whole cumin seeds. Let these toast for 60 seconds so they start to flavor that oil, and then right before adding the beans, sprinkle in some smoked paprika, followed by 1 can of pinto beans, the liquid in all. Bring this mixture to a simmer and let it cook for about 5 minutes. Now during this time, take out a potato masher or a fork and mash them into whatever texture you want. For me, I like to mash it until it's mostly liquid with some little chunks in there, but you can make this smoother or chunkier depending on your preference. If you want it thicker, let it simmer for an additional couple of minutes so the moisture evaporates. And critically is the last step, adjust salt and lime to taste. Some cans of beans have salt added and some do not, so adjust to taste, and lastly, the lime juice is added to help brighten everything up. Once they taste good, transfer the beans to a serving bowl, and then for the toppings, I thinly slice some iceberg lettuce, diced red onion, diced some cherry tomatoes, and of course, for a bean and cheese tostada, we need some cheese, which I like using Colby Jack here. Now let's assemble. And the order of ingredients for tostadas is very important, and I'm going to show you 2 variations, one for breakfast and one for lunch. For a bean and cheese tostada, I like to actually place the cheese down first and follow with the hot beans over the top so it starts to soften and melt a bit. Once the beans are added, add a drizzle of crema, and here's where you can create a breakfast or lunch version. For the breakfast version, fry a crispy sunny side up egg and then just lay that right on top of the beans, and I like to finish it with a drizzle of hot sauce, some cilantro, and queso fresco. For the lunch version though, all you need is that shredded lettuce, red onion, and diced tomato, and this is a true example where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
So almost as a tostada rite of passage, I feel like you have to do just a bean and cheese one, especially with this order where the cheese is on bottom because it's a little bit melted due to the warmed up beans, and then just give it some onion, tomato, lettuce, little crema, like you're good to go. It's seriously just so comforting, so simple. I mean, why not just like make some beans? You can throw more proteins on if you want to, which is exactly what we're gonna do in tostada number 2.
While this tostada uses steak as the protein, for me, it's all about the combination of the smoky corn and crema, and it's probably my favorite tasting of the 3 tostadas. For the salsa, grab out 2 ears of corn and slice lengthwise down the top to remove the kernels. Set the griddle over high heat and toss the corn directly down, and I'm going to let this sit here for about 2 to 3 minutes without touching it so it starts to brown. So meanwhile, let me tell you where I got this griddle I'm using from today's sponsor, Made In. Made In makes a whole array of high-quality performance cookware for home cooks, but this carbon steel griddle is my most used item. It's perfect for breakfast things like the fried egg I showed earlier. It's amazing for large cuts of meat like the flank steak I'll show you shortly. I can make 4 smash burgers at once like I did last week, or I can use it for spreading out and browning the corn like I'm doing here. Literally, I use this about 90% of the time when I cook. It covers 2 burners, comes pre-seasoned, can handle up to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, and is perfect for anything you throw at it. And also, during the summer, the griddle is great to use outside on the grill or over the open fire. So, if you want to check out the carbon steel griddle or any of Made In's high-performance cookware, head to the link below, and thank you again, Made In, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to that corn. While the corn continues to brown up, grab out the cilantro, except we'll not be using the leaves for this corn salsa. Instead, I'm going to flip it around and use the cilantro stems. Now, I like to slice off the very end of the stems because they can get a little dirty, but then just slice down the rest of the stem into little pieces. And these stems are a super underrated piece of the cilantro that typically just gets thrown away, but it gives a nice little crunch that goes perfectly for the corn salad. Once cut, just slide these into a bowl for later. Now, back at the stove, the corn has started to brown, so flip it over with a spatula, and after another 2 minutes, add a sprinkle of smoked paprika to the corn and stir everything together. Now, this is a hot smoked paprika, which gives it just a hint of spice, but you could add a little chili powder if you wanted to in its place. Now, this alone will make a great side dish, but for the tostada, I like to turn this into a little salsa. Transfer the corn to a metal bowl and add the cilantro stems we chopped up earlier. Lastly, add the juice from 1/2 of a lime, and it is amazing how simple but delicious and flavorful this is. Just mix the corn, and this can be stored in the fridge for a couple of days ahead of time to let those flavors deepen even further. The second component here is the steak, but you can use any protein for this tostada. I chose a flank steak as it's kind of a nice budget cut that serves a crowd really well if you are making these for friends or family. So I grabbed out the flank steak, patted it dry, and then salted it, and threw this in the fridge to dry brine for about 4 hours until I was ready to cook. To cook the steak, add a little drizzle of oil to the ripping hot griddle, and I'm shooting for at least 400 degrees Fahrenheit here, and then slap that flank steak down, and this will take a little while to cook as it has a similar bulbous shaped exterior like a chicken breast. So you're going to end up with some slightly overcooked portions towards the end of the flank steak, with the middle taking the longest to cook. I shoot for around 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the very center and then pull it off. But during this time, due to carryover cooking, it should rise another 10 degrees to around 130 degrees Fahrenheit, giving us a nice medium rare. While the steak is coming up in temperature, I grabbed out the tostada components, which for this are the tostadas, obviously, but some crema, the salsa verde, pickled onions, and of course our cilantro lime and smoky corn. First, slice off a hunk of the steak, and as you can see, the middle is kind of that medium rare, while the ends are much closer to a medium well or well done. To slice the steak, it's important to do so very thin, as flank steak is one of the chewier cuts of meat. So to assemble the tostada, first add a layer of the crema and follow that with the corn. And make sure you get some nice even spread to the outside of the tostada. Follow that with a hefty amount of the sliced steak before adding some salsa verde, or whatever hot sauce you want, pickled onions, and some queso fresco. And let's eat.
So as you can tell, I need to make another one of these, but really for me what makes this is the crema and corn combo. It's creamy, it's sweet and a little bit smoky from cooking it and that smoked paprika in there. And then obviously you could use any protein for this, chicken, pork, just do vegetables, do beans again, I don't know, whatever you want to. But if you are doing flank steak, again, make sure you slice it into like very thin pieces so you can actually chew through it without it falling apart and just kind of getting all over the place. Like how you construct a tostada is also very important. And really for me, this showcases the creativity. I've never made this specific combination before, like literally filming it, and it turned out even better than I imagined. So that's why I love these tostadas. You really get to flex your creativity. With that being said, let's move on to tostada number 3, which is one of the most comforting fillings that you can possibly make, and one I had all over Mexico.
Now I need to do a whole deep dive video on Picadillo, as almost every Spanish-speaking country has a different variation, but at its core, it's a meat-based hash. In Mexico City, the basic one I had was with ground meat, potatoes, and peas with a spice-laden tomato sauce, but there are some variations that use olives, raisins, and spices like cinnamon and cloves. The one thing they all have in common, though, is they're one of the best make-ahead dishes that can be served over rice in tacos, quesadillas, or tostadas. And the great thing about this version is that everything can be done in parallel with the 10 minutes needed to boil the potatoes. So to start, let's chop the potatoes. I wash these, but don't actually bother peeling them. Dice the potatoes into fairly small pieces by first cutting them into planks, then in half and across into cubes. Toss the cubed potatoes into a pot, set the pot over a stove over high heat before covering them with water, and lastly add a big sprinkle of salt, and now let's get back to the cutting board. I very finely diced 1/4 of a white onion and 2 cloves of garlic, then just toss these into the bowl. For the beef, set a stainless steel pan over high heat and add a tiny little drizzle of oil. Next, toss in 1 pound of 85/15 ground beef and press it into the pan to let this brown. And I'm going to let this sit here completely untouched for about 4 to 5 minutes so it develops a crust underneath. Now during these 5 minutes, the potatoes have finished boiling, so I just strain them off. And at this point, you can see I have some nicely developed crusty bits on the beef, which gives us that extra beefy flavor. So flip the ground meat over and let this cook for just another 2 minutes before transferring the chunks into a large bowl. And as you can see, we have this nice fond left behind in the pan, which we're going to use to capture with our sauce. Add in the onion and garlic mixture we chopped up earlier and let that saute for a minute before coming in with the spices. This is 2 grams of smoked paprika and 3 grams of ancho chili powder, and just mix that together. Next, come in with a half can of whole peeled tomatoes before giving those a mash with a potato masher to create a sauce-like consistency. Once the sauce has formed, add the brown beef back in, and very importantly, use the potato masher to turn this into little pebbly bits. And I love this small texture for ground beef. Add the cooked and drained potatoes before adding 3 more seasonings to dial in this picadillo. First, we need salt, which is going to enhance everything, and secondly, I like giving this a squirt of hot sauce, and you can use whatever kind you want here. Then lastly, I like to grate in some cinnamon. A lot of picadillo variations will use cinnamon or cloves or some other spices to give it a nice aromatic complexity. Now, you're not trying to make this taste like a cinnamon-forward sauce, it's very much used in the background. Lastly, adjust the consistency as needed. You can make it more saucy by adding more tomatoes or a little water, or just let it cook down if you want it thicker. For tostadas, I definitely like it on the thicker side. And this stuff is just a great, high-volume, delicious one-pot meal. So I decided to transfer some of this to a container for the fridge, and the rest I actually threw into a freezer bag so I can reheat this later like I talked about in my freezer meat video, because this is one of the greatest things to store in your freezer.
So this right here, I think, is the big benefit for this one. I mean, I'm gonna toss in some of this into the fridge, like to eat over today and tomorrow, but I get tired of leftovers like pretty easily. So the rest, threw it in a Ziploc bag, lay it thin, and I'm gonna just throw this in the freezer. And then I have that to look forward to sometime in the future. But meanwhile, let's assemble the final tostada.
To assemble, it's as simple as now coming home, throwing some picadillo into the microwave, adding it to your tostada, topping with crema, lettuce, tomato, pickled onions, and maybe a little queso fresco, and that's literally all there is to it.
I mean, post-workout, 8:45 p.m., like, can you throw something much better together in like 5 minutes? I mean, I don't really think so. That really sums up tostadas. They're amazing, they're comforting, they can be creative, or they can be used to fit perfectly within your lifestyles. They've definitely totally changed how I approach a lot of weeknights. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. The recipes for these specific tostadas will be up on our website, but as always, use your creativity and kind of the concepts we covered in this video. But that will wrap it up for me in this one. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace. Mm.